Welcome, everyone, to the Flowing Health Podcast. I'm excited today to have Marc Singer on, who's a mindset coach. And the theme of the day is to hell and back and then some, because Marc has been there, has come back, and then is now helping other people lead amazing lives as a coach. So welcome, Marc.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, great. And I came across you recently. We haven't really talked that much. I know you have a book coming out next year with the same title, so that's really exciting. But maybe just for now, should we start with your story? Maybe what defines you as who you are today, and how you can help so many people as a result of going through what you've been through.
Of course, yes. Well, yeah, it's quite of a story and a half, to be fair. So I'll go through the basics of it. The nuts and bolts of it. So I got sentenced to something, sent to prison with a life sentence 11 years ago for something I hadn't done. I was convicted and I was given what's called an IPP sentence. Now, a lot of people won't understand what that means. It's called indeterminate public protection. It's now been outlawed. It's abolished. But at the time, it was given out to anybody who had offended twice in a similar fashion. Now, I was given this sentence for something I hadn't done. However, I didn't see myself as a victim of injustice at that time, because I did have a past. And touching on that, when I left school, I got involved in the gang. I was bullied badly at school, and that sent me on a antisocial path. I developed a set of beliefs and attitudes which led me down the wrong path, and I got involved in all sorts of unsavory things, involved with the police, drugs, that sort of stuff. And for many years, I was involved in this sort of lifestyle. And I did a lot of things I shouldn't have. And later on, when I'd sort of moved on from all of that, I was living on the surface, a healthier life. I had a good job, a girlfriend, and so on. That lifestyle came back to haunt me when I was arrested at a work Christmas party for being in part responsible, so to speak, of a fight that night. And I got the blame for the fight, even though I hadn't done what they actually accused me of. So long story short, I got convicted of that and found given the life sentence in prison, which was the IPP, on the basis that I'd been in trouble before. And it was like 2 strikes and you're out, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But whilst I was given a 6-year tariff, this is the minimum amount that you have to serve whilst in prison. But at the time, everybody or nobody was getting out. Because the release test at the time was that in order to be released from prison, you had to prove that you would never reoffend again, which is impossible. So no one was getting released. And I was
just out of interest, how do they want you to prove that? Do they test you?
Well, there was no way. And this is the thing. This is why it was a travesty of justice, because it was at the time when the sentence was actually brought out, there was no way of actually proving that you could. So no one was getting out. And that meant there was a rise in suicides, obviously a lot of mental health issues and so on. And no one was motivated, because obviously if you're going to prison, you're told from the very word go that you're never ever going to be released. What do you do? However, they wanted you whilst in there to do what's called offending behavior courses. Now, theoretically, these courses are set up to reduce your risk. But however, the way it actually played out is every time you did a course, they'd find more risk things to deal with and then put you on another course. So it was a never ending cycle of courses. In total, I did about 30 odd courses.
Wow.
And so it was always ongoing, and naturally, that can be disillusioning, because you're not, even though you think you're making progress, you're not. And so it was always like that. And there's a guy, I'll give you an example. There's a guy in there who made a threatening phone call, who's done 22 years.
Wow.
This is the thing. It's not all people who have murdered people or anything like that. These are normal, everyday people who have committed like an assault or something like that. So what they did in 2015, it was actually Michael Gove. It was David Blunkett who brought the sentence in 1996, actually. And it was actually brought out originally before sex offenders. And the idea was that, if someone had committed a rape or something like that in the past, they wanted to be able to give those people a sentence which wasn't necessarily like a mandatory life sentence, but it was still in a life sentence in that they had control over that person. So even if they were released, they were still on life license so that they can keep tabs on them. So the idea was brought out there. But what happened was it got misused and rolled out across the board. to everybody and anybody who had committed any sort of offence which could be deemed violent or threatening or aggressive. So thousands and thousands of people ended up with this sentence. In 2015, Michael Gove abolished it after there was a lot of protesting and demonstrations and all sorts of stuff going on, and he abolished it, but he didn't make it retrospective, so that anybody who had the sentence already had to still serve it. So everybody who was still in prison had to still serve this sentence. And ironically, it was only last month, 28th of November, that it's gone through the Houses of Parliament again to have the sentence completely removed now, so that everybody who has it is going to be moved to a normal sentence, let's say. And if you're on license, that license will be squashed and so on.
Okay.
And that's now going through the Houses of Parliament to become a bill. The life license as such, after 10 years of being out of prison, you can apply to have it removed as it currently stands. However, they're also talking about removing that completely, but if that doesn't come to pass, then reducing it from 10 years to 5 years. So anyone who's listening should look it up, because it's mental torture, and thank God it's no longer being given out, but that's what I got. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I was in a position where I had no hope of getting out on the surface, but thankfully I chose not to think like that at the time. I thought, well, I'm going to work as hard as I can to sort of work on myself, because I recognized that it was my fault that I'd ended up in there. Even if I hadn't done the actual offense, I'd done things in the past which had led me to that situation. So I realized it was my beliefs and attitudes that had caused me to be in that situation. So I did a lot of work within the first 2 years of that sentence. In the 6 years, I was in the minimum time of 6 years. I did a lot of work internally in the courses that I was doing to address the beliefs and attitudes that had created those antisocial beliefs. Now, what I discovered is that I developed a belief at a young age of probably 13 that if anybody's aggressive or bullying or threatening or talks down to you, the way to deal with that is through either aggression or violence. That was the belief I developed at a young age, and it dogged me through my life. Mm. And every time I felt bullied or patronized or whatever, I would react in an aggressive way. Mm. Now, that happened that night when I was at the work Christmas party. I was doing exceptionally well at work. I was their top salesman in the business. And I was under a lot of pressure. I was working 7 days a week, 12-hour days. And it was similar to now, actually. In December, it was snowing heavily. And it was a work Christmas party. I was late for the Christmas party at this hotel, and I was still at work, and I was pushing myself to the limit. My girlfriend was on the phone moaning at me because she was at the hotel. So I was under pressure to get there. And I got there and I was quite low energy. I was tired, stressed. And as the night progressed, everyone was drinking. There was some bright spot decided to put 2 rival branches in the same building. Now, our branch, I was working for a car dealership, by the way. Our branch had outperformed the other branch that year. And there was a lot of animosity from their side. And during the evening, 4 guys from their branch had attacked and beat up a young guy who was working for our branch. Absolutely nothing to do with me. But my girlfriend and this young lad's girlfriend happened to be there at the time. And my girlfriend jumped in and sort of tried to intervene. And they turned on my girlfriend. Someone told me about this, and I came out later on. This is about an hour later now. And I came out and confronted these guys. I was aggressive. I hold my hands up for that. But they attacked me. And it was I who got beaten up, and I who ended up in hospital for 2 weeks. And I got arrested for it as well. And it was I was concussed. I had broken ribs. I had a broken arm. And I wasn't really sure why I was getting arrested, but I did. And that went on for 3 months. I wasn't charged, and we were trying to get the guys arrested themselves because they had assaulted me, but the police refused. And long story short, the company fired me for it, suspended me, and then fired me. And then they did an internal investigation where they went around all of the people involved that night and took statements, which we later found out the police had taken as well and doctored. And they chose to change certain statements to suit their own case. And we didn't know this at the time, but when it came to the actual case in court, there was no CCTV, there was no independent witnesses, there was no forensics. Anything that would have backed my case up not there. And so it was a bit of a sham. And but again, I can't blame even though that was, yes, on the surface it was very much a victim of injustice, but I can't blame them because I can only blame myself for putting myself in that situation. So I was found guilty as soon as the jury saw my previous, basically, because I don't blame anyone for this, because if I was on the jury, I'd have probably done the same. If you see a guy who's got a history in the past of being involved in trouble, and then someone says, has he done this or not? What are you going to think? And naturally,
that influences you. Yeah,
exactly. So they found me guilty, and I was found guilty, and I went to prison for that. So I had to take responsibility at the start of the sentence, even though, and that's hard. It's not an easy thing to do when you know you haven't actually done something. It's not an easy thing to take responsibility
to
for.
Accept. Yeah.
And so I had to, though, and in order to get out, because if I hadn't, then there's no chance at all, even though they was telling me no chance of ever getting out. So long story short, I started working on myself quite, a lot, and I was doing all right. I was doing really well. And it was 2 years into that sentence, I was happy. I was feeling good about myself. I was exercising. I was in control of how I felt, and I was positive. But then my life changed forever. Then, first of all, I had a very close family, and they were very supportive. They were there all the way through everything that I went through. And they were supporting me outside as well all the time. And my mother suddenly got ill, and it was at Christmas 2013, and she was diagnosed with cancer. And within 2 weeks, she was dead, basically. She died 4 days before Christmas 2013. Next week, 21st of December. And that was a massive shock. It just completely turned my life upside down. And it was, there was other things, factors in. We had cats and things like my cat died the day before my mum, just bizarre events that you can't predict. 3 months later, I'd been moved to another prison by now to be closer to my father. I had to arrange the funerals from prison myself because I had no siblings and my father wasn't very well. I'd moved to a new prison, which was closer to home, because I was in Kent. And it was 3 months to the day after my mother passed that I was on the phone to my father, and he died too of a cardiac arrest as I was talking to him.
Wow.
And he literally just dropped down dead as I was chatting to him on the phone. It was crazy. And that was it was a chain of events. And in total, in 10 months, I lost 31 people, animals, and things, such as my home, that I loved. So pretty much my life disappeared in that 10-month period. And I had to hold it together. I had to deal with both the funerals, my mum and dad. I had to sell the family home. I had to get all the cats rehomed and all the stuff. Loads of the
That's
cats.
all from prison. That's all
from prison. All from prison. All on my own. Thankfully, I mean, I had friends helping me, such as like clearing the family home out and stuff like that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have coped. I don't know how I would have managed to do other than that. If I had no money at the time. Later on, I sold the family home. I had a bit of money, but at the time, I had no money to do anything. So it was very difficult to sort of get through and manage. And I managed to hold myself together mentally by burying my emotions at that time and just focusing on the day-to-day stuff, working and focusing on what I had to do to get through that. And like I said, in that 10-month period, it was like my grandfather died not long after my father as well. I was very close to my grandfather. So that was all my immediate family gone. So yeah, it was a stack of cards falling down. And at the end of that 10 months, I got moved to what's called an open wing, where you got more freedom and flexibility from like a normal wing where you're locked up all the time. And I phoned a friend to tell her where I was moving to this wing, because it was good news. And she said, I've got some news for you. And I said, oh, what's this? And she goes, well, my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, I should say, who was the only person probably still alive in the world who I still had feelings of real love for, was now seeing my best friend. But they had never met before. And as far as I was aware, they never even knew each other. But what had turned out, which I now know, I didn't know at the time, was that the so-called friend had used me to basically get to my ex-girlfriend by visiting me and finding out information about her, befriending her and so on. And they'd started a relationship without me knowing. And that was sort of the catalyst. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Gosh. And I took an overdose and I nearly died. I sort of collapsed. I had a sort of minor heart attack. I don't know if it was a full-on heart attack, but I wasn't very well. And luckily, one of my friends gave me CPR, or the guy. But had I not moved to that open wing, I would have probably died, because it was luckily, but the guy was walking past and he knocked on the door to see if I was up for a cup of tea or something. And he walked in and I was on the floor.
Wow.
And had he not done that, I would have probably passed away. I don't know. But I mean, luckily he found me. And so that was my sort of turning point, really, because I sort of woke up the next day or whenever it was, because I refused to go to the hospital because I didn't want to let them know that I'd taken an overdose, because I was worried about the effect that might have on my sentence with the IPP. I thought that would just cast me back years of all the work I'd done. So I kept that quiet. I made out that I had anaphylactic shock. So anyway, I made a pact with myself. I said, I'm no longer ever going to be a victim to my circumstances. I'm going to take control and responsibility of my life and get myself the heck out of prison. But what I did is I chose not to focus on that. I chose not to focus on getting out of prison. I focused only on what I could do right then to get better, to get healthy.
In the present. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really,
and to work on myself. And slowly but surely, I started getting healthier and better, physically, mentally, and emotionally came a bit later. And I was doing a degree. I started doing the degree in there. I was mentoring young kids for the educational department. I was teaching critical reasoning skills in the education department. So I was doing everything I could to sort of keep myself mentally occupied and keep progressing in the way that I wanted to. And after 3 years, it paid off. I got out. It was actually Michael Gove. He took over. He changed the law in 2015 and reduced the risk of the IPP so that people were more able to actually have an opportunity to prove themselves outside.
Once they were back out in society. Yeah.
So that was in 2015 and I got out in 2017. So it was 2 years. And it just goes to show you don't know what's going to happen in life. So you can't predict what's going to happen. No one knew that was going to happen, that he'd changed the law. And it happened a year after that incident I just mentioned there. So that happened in 2014. He changed the law in 2015. And in 2017, I got released.
Well, not that long ago. I mean,
5 years now. So it was ironic. It was I got sent. Another weird thing is I got sent to prison on the 11th of the 11th, 2011 at 11 a.m. in the morning. Anyone who reads into numerology might read into that bit. But yeah, it was a strange turn of events. So yes, that's what happened in prison. I got out, and that was completely culture shock because obviously everything I ever knew had gone. Luckily, I had an aunt who was able to give me a room for 3 months because they only let you out if you have somewhere to go.
Wow.
Otherwise I wouldn't have got out. I had no social housing or anything like that. So she put me up for 3 months. I had some money in the bank because I'd sold the family home, and I was able to rent from then after 3 months and start focusing on getting my life back in order. And it took me about a year or so because I had all of that emotional baggage that I hadn't unpacked. During prison, I'd pushed all that to one side to get through it. I couldn't focus on the emotions.
A year is quite quick to deal with all of that. I mean,
you don't deal with it in just one
fully
box. It's still ongoing. But I mean, there's elements of it that still, you're always going to be working on. But the reality is, I mean, I'll explain. I mean, after a year, I was ambling along. I didn't really know which direction I was going in with my life. So I'd had therapy, I'd had counseling, but neither of them were really working for me in the way that I'd hoped. But I'd found coaching. And now there's a funny story about that, really. I mean, the seed had got planted in prison because I did a business course. And during the business course, they said to me, what would you like to do, hypothetically, as a career? And I just said, first thing that came into my head, life coach. I hadn't thought of it. I didn't know what a life coach did. I knew nothing about that. And I just said it as a joke more than anything. But then they went off and researched that and came back with all a list of all the skills and attributes a life coach has. So I looked at that and I thought, well, actually, that's me, So anyway, it planted the seed. And when I came out of prison, I had coaching. And that worked for me in terms of getting me a bit more emotionally aware and so on, and helped me unpacking stuff. So I thought, this is going to be where I want to do. I just had that feeling, that gut feeling. So anyway, long story short, I mean, I was going to do one of these courses you see online where they say, right, it's £1,500, you become a life coach or whatever. My coach actually said, look, Mark, if you're serious about this, do it properly. Find the best one you can find, research it properly, and then invest properly into it. You know, it costs you a few quid, but it's worth it. So I did. I went on the ICF website, the International Coaching Federation website, looked up all of their accredited courses, and I found the best one I could find, which is the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. They were the top school worldwide. They still are. And I thought, sod it. And I went for it. I had no clue where it would go. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I just thought, sod it. And I £16,000, I went for it, and there you go. 2 years later, I qualified as a professional coach. But what I learned wasn't just how to coach people. You know, a lot of people won't understand what coaching actually is, but it's not just like teaching you how to coach people, even though that's obviously part of it. They teach you a philosophy, a way of being, that when you learn and practice and become, it completely changes your life from the inside out, and you can create whatever you want with your life. Now that you come back to what you said about the emotional aspect of it, that's what I've been learning, practicing, and becoming this last however many. I qualified in 2019. I started 2018. I started it. Ever since then, I've been learning and practicing and becoming this new philosophy. So nearly 4 years, and so and this is where I am now, because that is what's helped me become who I am now. That's what's helped me unpack all my own baggage. Even after I qualified fully 2019. Yeah. And I couldn't become a coach straight away because I still had to do the work myself internally. So I did a lot of work with that. And it was the key for me was self-acceptance. You know, that was the thing. I had to do a lot of work on, the self-acceptance thing. And that took me a while. It took me a while to come to, because I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of blame. I had a lot of stuff in the past that I had to work through. That took time. But
I think that's an underlying thing for most people anyway, regardless of your incredible story. You know, self-acceptance, self-love, you know, often we're very good at giving it to others or helping others, but if we neglect ourselves, then we're in trouble. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're right. And it's so true. And this is an underlying thing with a lot of people who I work with, is they're giving people, they're caring people, they put others before themselves so often. But one of the key things that we have to focus on in order to be not only the best versions of ourselves, but to help the people we want to help, is self-care.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got the self-care element going on at the same time as caring for others, then you're not really caring for anyone.
I agree.
You know, in the way that you truly want to. So it's fundamentally important. And you can pretend you are, you can try and cover things up, but the reality is, I learned, it took me a long while to learn that. And it was actually inadvertently, I'd liked a girl that I fancied, and you know, I'd sort of become attached to this girl, and then found out that she wasn't really interested in me, and she'd got someone else, and it just sort of became a bit of a shock. But what it did is my confidence, my self-esteem was low, and I couldn't work out why. And it was like, it took me, I had to go into, and that incident with the girl triggered that whole turn of events where I went into myself and sort of really, you know, I was even thinking about suicide at that time. I was just like so fed up with everything. And I reached a point of self-reflection where I just thought, you know, enough's enough, really. I have to take responsibility and fully accept me for who I was in the past, who I am now, and everything in between.
And start there. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's very powerful what you said. So then you became, and did you start coaching? You worked on yourself, and then did you start gradually bringing people in and helping them?
Well, I started my business, coaching business, ironically, a month before COVID. Didn't know COVID was going to happen. Of
course, yeah.
But and it was on the back of what we just discussed there. That was actually at Christmas 2000. I can't remember what year now. It was 2019. Yeah, it was Christmas 2019 when I had that episode with the girl, because I found out she was with someone else on the anniversary of my mother's death, which was the 21st. And I remember looking at the Instagram picture and bursting out into tears. And that throughout that whole Christmas period, from the 21st to the end, to January the 1st, I was in tears. I was crying, and all of those emotions, the pent up angst and emotion that I'd built up over that whole however long it had been, came flooding out. And it was like a new start for me, that 1st of January. And I just woke up on the 1st of January, thought, right, now's the time. And I had a coach myself still. So he was helping me with the marketing and stuff like that, which I was clueless with and still am. But so yeah, I went hell for leather for it from that start, and I started doing my live show that January, the first week of January. That was my first show, and my 100th show is tonight.
Yeah, tell us. Sorry to interrupt. Tell us about the live show. That's on Facebook, isn't it?
Yes, it's on live on Facebook. It's on my YouTube channel as well and other platforms.
Okay, I'll put the links in below so people can tune into that, and they can watch past episodes, I imagine.
Oh yeah, they're all on there. I wouldn't go too far back to the beginning because they're bloody awful, the first one. But,
don't worry, I was awful. We were all
the new
awful.
ones are all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's the 100th one tonight, which is ironic.
Wow.
I mean, so yeah, I started that then, and I actually got clients quite quickly, to be fair, and I thought this is how it's going to be all the way along, but it wasn't necessarily the case. We, as any practicing coach will know, it's up and down. But at first, I went healthy, but at first, I'll be honest, I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew the process, I knew the philosophy, and so on. But as far as coaching, it was all new to me. But you learn as you go, and now I'm in a much better place, thankfully, in terms of what I do. I've got it nailed now. But yeah, I mean, the process has been a really, it's been how long now? Nearly 3 years. So yeah, this is where I am now. The process of building the business bit by bit by time by time, and at the same time learning more and more about yourself as you go as well. It's a journey. Yeah,
and I agree. I think actually the more you work with others, the more you learn about yourself, and it's never ending anyway. So I think I love what you're doing. I love your honesty and your openness about your story, because people will relate to that. You've been to hell and you're back, and then some is we're just starting, hopefully on then some. I know you work with women and men, but recently you're looking at your marketing and wanting to work more with men. Tell us a bit more about that, because I'm also, being a man, I realize there's a lot less available, I think, for men than for women, and men are not so good at opening up, and there's much higher suicide rate for men. So true. I think there's a need, 100%. So I'm really excited to hear about your take on that aspect.
Again, I mean, like you touched on, I do work with men and women. I mean, funny enough, most of my clients currently are women. But I mean, but what happened was, I found through my past story, I was attracting a lot of everyday guys from different sort of working class background type, construction industry sort of guys, those sort of things, who you wouldn't normally expect to go to a coach as such, because of the stigma that you might think around the coaching industry. It has a certain appeal to certain people, but you wouldn't expect certain people to be interested in that. And even like my friends and people like that, you do have that, their belief that it's woke, or it's for women, or it's effeminate, or, and it's not necessarily the case. That is a limiting belief. Yeah. People think this stuff, but it's not true. It's not. Men and women, men just deal with their emotions differently to women. Simple as that. It's not that they don't deal with their emotions. Not like, you can talk about being, that's nothing like that. And so what I found is a lot of guys would come to me with the same sort of story. They'd say things like, I don't want to be patronized by someone from, I don't know, a university background, or, and again, it's a limiting belief, because that's not the case at all. But this is what a lot of people think. And, or, I don't want to be judged because I've taken drugs, or I've been in prison, or I've had a fight, or whatever it may be. So a lot of blokes would pull away from that because they didn't think it was manly. It was wishy-washy. It was about the universe, or it was about that, and so they believe these stories that they create. We'll create in our minds about whatever it may be, and then that restricts us from seeing it objectively or with any sort of clarity. And that stops us actually doing or taking that step forward. And you're rightly so. I mean, like the construction industry, for instance, has the highest rate of suicides out of any industry.
Really? Gosh.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's very kind of, not just masculine, but it's like, who admits that they are vulnerable, or that they're unhappy at home, or that they hate their boss. I mean, it's just get on with it. Like you say, that's the old sometimes I like this term, confined masculinity and liberating masculinity. So confined is you just don't talk about it, and you just, go out, get drunk, or do things to cover it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
in a way, I mean, that's what I did. If you can think, I mean, like when you look about my prison, I blocked the emotional aspect of it away, just to get through the day to day. So there is that old mentality of get up and get on with it sort of thing. Yeah. But that can have it's not necessarily negative to do that.
No,
there's advantages and disadvantages to everything. I don't like to label things as right or wrong or good or bad.
No.
Now with that, if I'd have done that consciously and chosen to consciously turn off those emotional things to get through that day-to-day process, but being aware of the fact that I was doing that, it would have been less of a burden for me later on down the line.
Yeah.
And this is what I teach people now, is that we can become much more conscious of what we're doing, thinking, feeling, and acting. And if we're able to consciously choose those things rather than subconsciously be dictated or, how to think and feel and act, then we're in control of that. And we can learn how to deal with that in a much more constructive way. Mm-hmm. And this is all I do now. I'm able to actually consciously work on my own thoughts, feelings, and actions and choose what serves me and what doesn't, and remove what doesn't. And this is all that is. It's common sense. It's not there's no sort of universe, like we said before, I mean, no universal or wishy-washiness about it. It's common sense approach. Now, in my view, it doesn't matter what industry or what you do in your life, if you're a footballer, if you're in a business or whatever, you want to be the best version of yourself. It doesn't matter who you are on the planet. Now, that makes sense. I mean, why would you want to just go to a certain level and stop? If you know you've got the ability to be the best, very best version of yourself, why wouldn't you want to do that? Now, for me, I know that I can be better than what I am now, and I want to be better than I am now. And I'm working on doing so, but I can't do that necessarily on my own. I need someone to help me to do that. And if you look at all the top performers in the world, Elon Musk, all these people like that, Ronaldo and all of those sort of characters, they're all got people helping them. They've all got coaches, and they're not weak men. They're not people who are wishy-washy sort of guys. Best performers, high performers, and they've got people helping them move to that next level, and keep moving forward. And this is what I do now. This is what I have a coach myself to help me do, and it's what I help others do. And it's exactly that. And so it's not about sitting down and talking about your emotions. It's about learning how to use your mind so that it works for you in any circumstance, so that you're always in control of the actions that you want to be using or moving forward with. That's what it comes down to. And so I think getting away from that stigma about it, it's just about talking about your emotions, or it's effeminate, or is important for a lot of guys if they really want to sort of really move forward in their life. And this is what I'm trying to do now by saying it's nothing to do with all of that. Well, talking about emotions is one part of it, but it's not about that. That's therapy. Coaching's about helping you create a much more effective way of doing things that gives you the ability to perform at your best consistently. That's what I do.
Great. And when you talk about the mind, can you just share a little bit about, what the difference is? Because obviously in therapy, people do open up about everything. But you talk about this no nonsense or common sense system, which I quite like. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I mean, I'll tell you about the program. I mean, I run a program with my clients. It's 6 months long. So a lot of coaches you'll get out there, what I call A to B coaches. They give you like a quick fix thing. So if, for instance, you'll go to a coach and say, I want a new job. What do I need to do to get that new job? So they'll break it down. Well, you need to look at this. You need to do that. And it's a very simplistic approach. I work holistically. So I will break down every element of your life, your way of seeing things, all the mental blocks and things that's getting in your way of you seeing things in the way that you truly want, and stopping you moving forward. We strip your mindset back so that it's actually, we remove all the things that are not working, and we rebuild it from scratch. Now, like I said, it's a 6-month progress, and it takes a lot of work. It's not an easy process. I'm not doing the work for you. You're doing the work, but I'm helping you do the work.
You're giving like a structure. You're giving
there is a yes, exactly. And it is a structured process. The process I use is only taught by one school worldwide, IPEC, which is the top school, which I've already touched on. And I think there's only 12,000 of us teaching this philosophy in the world. So it's very unique and it's very effective. And like I said, you start off with the process. I'm not going to go through the whole process here now. It'll take me forever.
No, it's just
but,
give a little.
But yeah, the way it works is it basically breaks down the way we think and gives us much more clarity on how and why we think the way we do and what would be a much more effective way of doing things. So we're able to take the things such as our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, which are intangible, and turn them into something tangible where we can actually choose what we want to be thinking and feeling in any given moment, so that we can also choose our actions. And if we can choose our actions, we can choose what we do with our lives. And that gives us the ability to perform at a very an optimal level consistently. Now, what I also do is we work on their 6 core areas in our lives: emotional, mental, physical, socially, environmental, and spiritually. When I say spiritually, I'm not talking about God or anything. I'm talking about our values, our morals, that sort of thing. So if you look at those 6 core areas and find out what's not working for you, or, you know, what is working for you, but if you find out what's not working for you, if there's something that's draining you in one or more of those areas, it will drain you and affect your energy across the board. So if physically you're not up to it, then that'll affect you mentally, emotionally, and every other area of your life, and so on. So we find what's not working and we find the solutions to fix what's not working, so that whatever it is that's holding you back from being successful, consistently productive in every area of your life, we find that solution for that, so that we're creating a much more optimal level of energy consistently throughout your life, so that you're always successful. So it's not like a short-term solution like the A to B solution, which is what a lot of coaches will do, which is why I don't really do the one-off sessions here and there. I will do, but if someone really wanted me to, but I don't think that's beneficial, because it's like going to the doctors or the hospital with a broken leg and having a band-aid stuck on it. It's not going to fix the problem. It make you feel good for 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are looking, sadly, for these quick fixes these days.
Work.
No, it doesn't work.
I had a guy recently, because now I work 6 months, my program, but when I first started, it was only 4 months. I've done it longer because I think it takes longer to sort of embed the ideas and start practicing. But I'll give you an example. The guy said to me, "Will I be fixed in 4 months?" And I said, "Well, firstly, you're not going to be fixed because you're not broken. Secondly, it doesn't work like that. This is a process. You learn it." And I always say to people who start with me, there's 5 steps to this process. You learn it, you practice it, you practice it, you practice it, and then you become it. Because you can't just, it's like reading a book. You can learn it, we can read a book, we can watch a documentary on telly, you can learn something new, but putting it into practice daily, every single day, takes discipline, it takes time, it takes commitment. And this is why having a coach by your side to keep you accountable to do it is so important. Because I wouldn't be as successful as I am now if I didn't have my coach doing the same with me. So it's very important. And that keeps you alert to these new things. It keeps you able to see different perspectives than your own. And obviously keep learning this new stuff. I give my clients a workbook, or several workbooks actually, as we go through the process. And that helps them embed the new learning as they go through it. And we also do what's called an attitudinal assessment at the start, which gives me a very clear idea of what's working for them and what's not working for them in terms of their beliefs, attitudes, perspectives, and so on. So from the very off, we know what's working, what's not, and what areas we want to really be focusing on. And it's a very clear, constructive process, which is, like you said a minute ago, based on common sense. It's literally common sense. I've had one of my best clients who has now been with me 18 months. I said this to you before we started. He's a very logical guy, and he didn't want to get, at first, before he started working with me, he was not sure, because he didn't like all the wishy-washy stuff, and he was not sure if it was going to be for him or not. Best thing he ever did. He came to me, he was anxious. He was an IT consultant. He had no confidence. He wouldn't talk to people in team meetings. He had no work-life balance. He was in a terrible place. He's now confident, leading the team meetings.
Wow.
And he's just done a speaking event in front of 80 other people at the Christmas work thing, which is something he would never have done before. And he said to me, he goes, "Mark," he goes, "the reason why I love this is because it's logical. It's common sense. It's basic common sense. You do this, you do that, this happens." And that's exactly what it is. And it's getting rid of all of the nonsense around it.
Yeah.
The people create in their own minds and just looking at the facts.
Great. Maybe you could be the common sense coach.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
No, serious. Because
I like that.
Yeah.
No, I might do that because, like, you know.
Well, it says what it does on the tin. On the tin, as they say.
I might patent that as soon as I walk away. Do you know you've hit the nail on the head? That's not a really bad one. I like that. No, because I'm actually in the middle of a rebrand, as we were discussing before, so your listeners will know. My fallback is my technological know-how or lack of know-how.
Yeah.
So I've got someone helping me with that now. But I mean, but yes, I mean, I'm in the middle of a rebrand and I'm looking to sort of really nail that. So that's a good idea. I like
that. Well, look, Mark, I think we come to the end, and I know because you're writing your book, we'll get you on either nearer the time or when the book is written next year, because it's an incredible journey. I find it amazing how in such a short time you've gone, from, being behind bars literally to coaching other people and transforming their lives in such a short time. So I think you're a great inspiration.
That's just testimony to the philosophy I work with. So,
Yeah, but it's and to you and to your commitment.
Well, you've got to do the work.
Yeah. So I think, I really honor you for that, and also working with men and women. But I think men will definitely be attracted to this kind of way of working, and to you because of what you've been through. So I really appreciate it. I'll put all the links, even to YouTube, the channel, in the show notes. So, please share this with others. Very inspirational talk, and get in touch with Mark if you need help with common sense in life and coaching. And look out for his rebrand.
We all need a bit more common sense in this
world. We do. All right. Thanks, Mark. Great to chat to you today. Take care. Thank you.